Well, hello Internet, and welcome to my JavaScript video tutorial. In this one tutorial, I'm going to teach you pretty much everything you would learn in a standard 300-page book on JavaScript. And in the description underneath the video, I have links to all the individual parts so you can jump to specifically what you want to learn about. And also, I have the code. Everything down there is free. And I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, so on the left side of the screen, I have Sublime Text, and the name of the file is jstut.html, and I wrote a little bit of styling inside here and kept this all in one page just to keep everything very simple. And on the right side of the screen, I have Google Chrome running. Also, down here in the bottom of the screen, I have a little tool that's going to allow me to go in there and check my code. And you can open that up just by going over here and clicking on View, and then Developer, and then JavaScript Console, and that will open up the JavaScript console. Alright, so first thing I'm going to cover here is how we can import some JavaScript code directly in here and use that. Very simple. All we're going to do is come in and type script, and then source is equal to, and then let's say that I have a JavaScript file called jstut, and now what I'll be able to do is come in here and import any of the functions that are inside of this file inside of here and run them and keep my code and my screen overall very, very clean. So there that is. Now what I want to do is come in here and actually show you how you can interact with the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a paragraph tag, and I'm going to give it an ID of, say, hello, like this. And this is sort of going to be an overview of a whole bunch of different things that we will then cover in more detail later on. Then I'm going to open up another script tag. Don't need any of this stuff right here. Then inside of it, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable that is going to store a name. And how I'm going to get the data to store inside of that variable is by opening a prompt on the screen. Now, this isn't something you would do all the time, but this is just a neat little example. Like I said, I'll give you more details as it comes up. And this is just going to open up a little prompt on the screen and, of course, ask them, what is your name? And then what I'm going to do is verify that they actually provided me a name. And what I'm saying here is if the name is not equal to null, null being empty. So I'm saying if they actually gave me a name, then I want to do something. What I want to do is I want to take the name and put a little message right here inside of my paragraph tags. To do so, I'm going to go document, and I need to get a hold of that element. And how I'm going to get a hold of that element is go get element by ID. And of course, the ID for this guy is say hello, just like it says right there. And then I want to put this inside of the HTML tags. To do that, you go enter HTML, and then I'm going to say something like hello space, and to concatenate or to combine the strings, I'm going to put a plus sign inside of there, and then I'm going to put your name. Now what I want to do is provide another condition, else if they did have a value of null for your name, which means that they didn't give me a name, I want to do something different. What I'm going to do here is open up an alert pop-up that says please enter a name next time. And there we go, got that all set up. Now if we save that, jump over here and reload our page, you're going to see right here it says what is your name. I'm going to say Derek, and I'm going to click on OK, and you're going to see over here it pops up inside of my paragraph tag, hello Derek. So pretty simple example, but it gives you an overview of a bunch of different things. So now let's jump over and talk a little bit more about variables. Now your variables are not going to be able to start with a number or contain spaces, but they can, of course, contain letters, numbers, underscores, or dollar signs. And remember, they are case sensitive, so if you have a variable named your name like that, it's going to be different than a variable called your name with a lowercase values. And as you just saw, you create these variables by just saying var, and then you give them a name, and then you assign a value to them. And it doesn't really matter what the data type is. We can come in here and go my age and assign that a value of 40, and we don't need to tell it what type of data type it is. It automatically figures that out itself. And also, because variables don't have a defined type, we can then come in here and do something like my name, exactly the same as above, where I have the string Derek. I can come in here and go and give it a value of 100, for example, and that's not going to cause an error. That's a quick overview of variables because they're pretty simple. So now let's take a little bit closer look at math functions. Now document write is going to allow us to write out to the browser right over here. And I can just come in here and let's do a little bit of math. We'll say something like 5 plus 4 is equal to, and then what we're going to be able to do is come in here and perform a calculation directly inside of our write function. And then if I want to put a new line inside of here, I would just go and throw a break statement in exactly like that. Why don't we also come in here and do another document write just to show you some different things that might cause errors. Let's say instead I would come in here and decide that I wanted to concatenate these guys by putting a plus sign inside of there. You might think that this guy right here is going to give me exactly the same value as this guy right here. Well, why don't we save it and reload and see if that's true? Well, we want to first come in here and throw in a script tag, of course, and then let's save that and reload it and see if that's true. Well, you can see right here that it isn't true. Why is that? Well, the reason why is right here where we use the comma, that is going to treat this as a mathematical function, while here where we have a plus, remember we can concatenate strings together, that's a concatenation operator, that instead is going to combine all these as if 5 and 4 were strings. So that's a common thing that throws some people, and now you understand it, you won't have a problem with it. Of course, we're also going to be able to come in here and perform all of the common mathematical operations. We'll be able to come in, for example, and do some subtraction on this, and some multiplication, and some division, as well as modulus, which is going to give us the remainder of a division. And you can see all the different mathematical calculations we can perform that are built into JavaScript. Another thing that's important to understand is that there is a standard way to store numbers inside of JavaScript. So let's say we wanted to come in here and figure out what the maximum number we could hold inside of here would be. We're just going to do this, and we'll say something like max num. And to get the maximum number we can store inside of here, we would just go number and then max value. And we can also get the minimum value, so we might as well take a look at that. And you can see right there the maximum value that we could store inside of our JavaScript code, as well as the minimum value we could store inside of there. Now, when we talk about minimums and maximums, you might think, well, those are going to be 100% accurate, that large. Nah, not really. Basically, let's come in here and let's perform a precision test, and know that a number can only be precise up to 16 digits of precision, as you're going to see right here. So here we go, I have a value inside of here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to this to see how the precision works out for us. So we'll save that, and you can see that this perfectly works fine. You can see these values add up to 2 and so forth and so on. But what would happen if we would come in here and say add another 0 and add another 0, file save, reload, and now you can see that everything gets a little bit messed up. So just understand that if any time you go over 16 digits of precision with your decimal values, that things are going to get messed up. And this isn't anything that's specific to JavaScript. This is true of pretty much every programming language. Another thing we want to do here is round some values. So say we have a customer that has a balance at our store, and we want to come in here and we want to print out that value, and we also want to verify or make sure that it comes out to 2 decimal places. Well, let's say that we want to set up something like a monthly payment for this customer so they can pay off their balance. Again, we're going to put a comma inside of there, and we're going to take their balance and we're going to divide that by 12, since it's going to be 12 months until they pay that off. If we then want to round this to 2 decimal places, we just go 2 fixed and then put a 2 inside of there like that. And you can see right there, to pay off that balance in 1 year, they would have to pay $130.32 per month. If you took the 2 fixed out of here, let's go and do that just so you can see what that looks like. You're going to see that it doesn't come out to 2 decimal places. So 2 fixed is another way for us to work or filter our numbers so that they make sense on the screen. Go and create another variable called rand number and give it a value of 5. There's all kinds of different shortcut ways we can work with our different values to perform common operations. Like, for example, let's say that we wanted to take random number and increment it by 1. We could just go plus plus like this, but be aware there's 2 different ways that we can increment, and I'm going to show you both of them right now so that you won't be confused by them. And the other way to do said thing is to come in here and throw the plus plus before the random number. And basically what this is going to do is the guy above is going to come in here and print this out to the screen and then increment the value of random number. And here what this is going to do is it's going to increment the value of random number and then print it to the screen. If I reload it, you can see exactly that that is what it did. We're also going to be able to come in here and subtract 1 from the random number, and you can see exactly how those calculations work out for us. And also there are other shortcut ways to add 1 to a value and then store it back inside of itself. So let's just come back inside of here, document write, and we'll do something like random number. If we wanted to add 5 to random number and then store the result of that calculation back into random number, this is how that's done. Random number plus equal to 5, and we can perform this calculation in multiple different ways. And if we reload that, you can see exactly how that works out. Another thing we can do, or one other thing we should pay attention to, is something called order of operations. And that just basically means that we're going to use parentheses to make sure the calculations are done in specific ways. So first we're going to do a calculation without using parentheses. And you're going to see, if we take 3 plus 2 times 5, that is going to provide us with different results than if we went in here and went 3 plus 2 and surround 3 plus 2 with parentheses, as well as right here, because normal order of operations says that we should multiply 2 times 5 and then add that to 3, but since we put the parentheses here, it's going to first add these, then multiply that times 5. And you can see there how that differs. Now there are numerous different properties and methods built into math libraries inside of JavaScript, so let's take a look at a couple of those. We would just access them, like let's say we wanted to get the value of the numerical constant e. What we would do is just do exactly what you see right here, and we could also come in and do the same thing with pi, two numbers that are built inside of JavaScript. And there you can see those numbers. And of course there are a ton of different methods that are built inside of JavaScript. And here is just a short list. We'll be able to come in and get the absolute value. We'll be able to come in and get the cube root. We'll be able to get a rounding to the ceiling, which means we're going to round up. A round to the floor, which means we're going to round down. A standard round, which means if it's 6.5, it's going to round up. If it's below 6.5, it's going to round down. We can get the natural logarithm. We can get the logarithm to the base of 10. We can get the max value of either one of these that is passed in. The minimum value, we can calculate the power as well as the square root and a whole bunch of other different calculations. Of course, there's cosine, sine, all those different things. And we can come over here and there you can see all those different calculations. And of course, you know how to round these down to different decimal places by using toFixed, which I just showed you a moment ago. Another thing that we can do is let's go and calculate some random values. Say we wanted a random number between 1 and 10. To calculate that, we're going to have to round it. So we're going to go math floor, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call math and call the random function. Now if I want to get a value up to 10, I'm going to multiply this times 10, and then if I want to start at 1, by default it's going to start at 0. I'm going to add 1 to it like that. And if I reload this, you can see that it came out with a value of 3. And if I reload it multiple times, you'll see it's going to give us multiple different random values. And there we are. Another thing that's important to know is how to convert strings into numbers. And to convert a string into a number, we would just type in number like that, and then throw in an actual string value or a reference to a variable that contains a number or whatever you want inside of there. And that will convert a string into a number. Likewise, if we would want to come in here and convert a string into an int, we would then come in and go parse int, change this to 5, and then likewise we could do the same thing with a floating point number by instead typing in parse float. And if we reload that, you can see exactly how those work out. So there you go. That is a bunch of different math functions as well as how we can work with strings and numbers and a whole bunch of other different things. Now let's jump over and take a look at how we can work with strings. Now we're going to be able to come in and combine strings as you saw a moment. Let's just create a variable. Let's call it random string like this. And let's type in a long, and if we want to combine these strings, we use the plus sign, of course, like we saw before. And there you go, really long string. Now we're going to come in here and manipulate it in a whole bunch of different ways. Let's say we wanted to come in here and get the string length. Let's go string length, and then outside of this, we could do random string, and then just call length, which is exactly what you would pretty much think it would be. And you can see that it gets you the total length of that string, which is 33. Let's say that we also wanted to come in and get the index for the word goes. Another thing I wanted to cover is if you wanted to put double quotes inside of here, you have to put backslash and double quote. And we could say something like goes and then another one, and that's going to allow us to put double quotes inside of this string because this is the start, and if you put this here, it's not going to get confused otherwise unless you use those backslashes. So we're going to go index for goes, and then to get that index or the character number for the location of the word goes, we just go random string and then say index of, and then we'll just type in whatever we're looking for. So there's the word goes like that, and then close off that function. and reload it, and you can see that it starts at the 19th character inside of our string. Let's say we want to return a value starting at a specific index. When I say index, I just mean which character in the string. So this is the 0 index. This space here is the index of 1. This is the index of 2. This is the index of 3. So that's what I mean when I talk about index. Let's come in and get just part of our string, and we're going to do that with slice. So we went in here and we found out that goes starts at the 19th position. So we're going to slice that out. We're going to type in 19, and then we're going to say what index we want to stop at, and that's going to be the 23rd. And we'll see exactly what that looks like in a moment, because we're going to do another slice. And with this guy, well, actually, let's come in here and get rid of that, get rid of that. There we go, much better. Another way we can do a slice is to go random string, slice, and let's say that we just want to get from the 19th value to the end of the string. Well, that's how that's done. And we can also come in and use a similar tool, and this is the substring tool, random string. And the only difference between this guy is this is going to allow us to define not the index, but an actual length. So for example, let's say we wanted to come in, start at the 19th index, and get everything 4 characters forward from that point. That's exactly how that would be done. And reload it, you can see it grabs goes. In the second situation, which is this guy right here, it's going to grab goes and the rest of the string. And here is another way that we can grab goes by defining the length of the word that we want to get a hold of. We could also come in here and replace part of a string with something else. So we can go random string like this and call replace. And let's say that we wanted to come in here and replace the words and on with the word forever. And you can see now the string is now a long string that goes on forever. We could also come in and get a specific character at an index. So let's say at index 2, and we want to print out exactly what is at index 2. We would go random string like this, and then we would just say character at, and of course we're going to put index 2 inside of there. We could also split a string into an array. We would do that just by going random string and split, and then if we wanted to split everything at all the spaces between the words, we would just put that there. If there were commas between the words, we would just put that like that, whatever. And we could also come in and trim any white space off of the beginning or the end of our string just by going random string and calling the trim function, and that will handle that for us. And then there's also 2 built-in ways to convert our string to all uppercase letters and as well to all lowercase letters. And you can see all those different guys there on our screen. Another thing we can do is we can style our strings using JavaScript in numerous different ways, but here I'm going to show you a very specific way. To do this, I'm going to create another variable. I'm going to call this string to style. And you're going to see that I'm going to be able to output this random string in numerous different ways inside of the browser. And basically what's going on here is I'm going to be outputting this string, random string right here, onto the browser window, and I'm going to be surrounding it with different tags. So I'm going to surround it with the big tag, the bold tag. I'm going to change the font color here, the font size. I'm going to make it italics. I can give it a link. I can use the small tag, the strike tag, the sub, and the sup. And if we reload this, you're going to see all the different ways we can style our strings right there on the screen pretty easily. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different ways we can mess around with strings. Now let's go and take a look at conditionals. Okay, so there are multiple different relational operators, and this is going to be different ways that we can compare values and then perform different or execute different amounts of code depending upon certain conditions. That's the whole point of conditionals. Now there is equal to, there is not equal to, there is greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. But for the most part, what you're going to use instead of equal to is 1, 2, 3 equal signs. And the difference here is whenever you just use 2 equal signs, that is just going to verify that the values are equal. When you use 3, that is going to verify that the value of a variable as well as the type of the variable are going to be equal. So for the most part, you're just going to use these equal signs. Another thing we can use are logical operators, and those are and, or, as well as not. And why don't we just go in here and start using these guys so that they make a little bit more sense. And how we're going to do that is I'm going to create a variable called age, give it a value of 8, and now we're going to get back into if statements. And this is just saying if the age value is greater than or equal to 5, and both of these are going to have to be true for us to be able to come in here and perform the calculations that come after this. Age is less than or equal to 6, then we're going to perform all of the code between these two curly brackets that we have right here. And what we're going to do in this situation is say go to kindergarten, else, and here we're going to throw in another condition. If age is greater than 18, then we're going to execute different code. And in this situation, we're going to say go to college. And then as a final condition, which is going to always be true if the first two conditions are false, we're going to say else, and we're going to say go to grade. And then let's perform a calculation inside of here, and we're just going to take the age minus 5. And now what we'll be able to do is reload this, and you're going to see go to grade 3 pops up. If we would then come in and change this to 5, we could reload and see the go to kindergarten pops up, and so forth and so on. Just to demonstrate the other different logical operators, we could also come in here, and if we give a value of true or false, this is going to show you how that works. What OR is going to do is return a true if either this value over here or this value over here is true. Let's also take a look at exactly what not does. What not does is just converts whatever this guy is into the opposite. So it's going to convert the trues into falses and the falses into trues. We'll just go not true like that. And why don't we come in here and demonstrate the different ways that equals works inside of JavaScript, because this confuses a couple people. So here what we're going to do is we're going to use a string of 5 like that, and we'll just use 2 double equal signs is equal to. And then we'll put this in between parentheses so that we don't cause confusion. Double equal sign and 5. And then down here, we'll do exactly the same thing, but instead we'll use 3 equal signs. And save it and reload it, and you can see right here that this comes back as true because there is one true inside of there. Not true equals false, and you can see here when we use double equal signs that that's going to come back as true, even though this is a string and this is a number. While this guy down here comes back as false because the values as well as the types are not equal. Okay, so a whole bunch of different ways to perform different code depending upon different conditions. And now let's come in and talk about switch statements. Now, a switch statement's basically going to be used whenever you have a limited number of potential options for a value. So let's say we're going to be checking here the value of age, and how we would check that is just by going switch and then age. Then what we're going to do is do something like case, which means in case the value of age is equal to 6, then we want to go and do something. And in this situation, what we would do is come in here and say something like go to kindergarten. Then if we wanted to jump outside of the break statement or switch statement, which means we no longer want to check any other values, we would type in break right like that. Another thing we could do is we could check 2 potential values. So we could say if age is equal to 5 or 6, then we want to execute this code. And of course we could come in here and do as many of these as we would like. So we'll say something like case 7, and in this situation we'll say something like go to first grade, and then end that with break. And then finally, after we go through all the potential possible values for age, if we wanted to perform a default calculation, if nothing else matches, we would just type in default like this, document right, and then we could just tell them something like subtract 5 from your age or something like that. And if we execute this, you can see right there that go to kindergarten pops up. Another way to perform different conditions is something called the ternary operator, and basically the way it operates is you're going to have a condition followed by a question mark, and if that condition is true, you're going to assign the value of whatever this guy is. Otherwise, you're going to assign whatever the value of this is. So why don't we go in here and just create one? It makes a lot more sense. So let's say we wanted to find out, can I vote? We're going to assign either this value to can I vote or this value to can I vote, depending upon this condition. So we'll say something like age is greater than or equal to 18, and then throw in a question mark, and it will be assigned the value of true if it is true, if that condition is true. Otherwise, it'll get the value of false. And we could print that out, but there's really no point. You can go ahead and do that on your own. So that is how we work with conditional operators. Now let's jump over and take a look at looping. Now looping is going to be used anytime you want to perform a calculation a certain number of times as long as a condition is true. And the first looping tool we're going to talk about is the while loop. So let's go and create a variable called I and give it a value of 1. And this is what the while loop looks like. So we're going to say something like we're going to continue to execute the code inside of our while loop as long as I is less than or equal to 10. Throw our curly brackets inside of there. And in this situation, we're going to come in and we're just going to print the value of I. And then we're going to increment the value of I. And there we are. And you can see right there it prints out the values 1 through 10. One thing that's going to differentiate our while loop from our other loops is you have to create this value that is going to increment as long as the loop continues to cycle. And of course you're going to have to find some way to increment that, otherwise you're going to get what's called an infinite loop. Another similar type of looping structure is the do while loop, and you're going to use that anytime you must go through a loop at least once. And the way that this is structured is you go do, and then you would go while, put the while part after here, and let's create a guessing game. We'll say something like while the value of guess is not equal to 15. We want to continue cycling through this guy. So we're going to come in here and we're going to ask them to guess what our number is. And let's open up a prompt so we can ask them what that value is. Guess number between 1 and 20, and then afterwards if they guess the value we will then come in and alert them to that. You guessed 15. Now we're going to be able to come in here, reload this. You're going to see guess a number between 1 and 20, and if we type in 12 and hit OK, it's going to ask us again. Otherwise if we type in 15, you guessed it, 15 pops up on the screen. So that's the difference between while as well as do while. Now let's jump over and take a look at for loops. Now basically our for loop is going to be 100% self-contained, which means instead of having the value outside of the loop like we saw with the while loop, we're going to put everything inside. So we can say something like j is equal to 0, and then put our condition inside of here as well. So we'll say as long as j is a value that's less than or equal to 20, we're going to continue to cycle through this. We're going to increment the value of j like that, and then let's perform a couple different things depending upon different conditions inside of here as well, just to back up and review how conditions work. So we'll say something like if j, the value of j, modulus 2 is equal to 0, then we want to perform different calculations, and basically what this is going to allow us to do is check if the value of j is an even number or not, because a modulus of 2 is going to come back as 0 if it's even, and if it is, we want to continue the loop. Basically what continue means is we want to stop executing everything else that follows in the for loop, jump up here, increment the value of j, and then continue on with the looping structure. There's another way we can stop execution for a for loop. We could do this with while loops and do whiles as well. We could come in and say if j is equal to 15, for example, then we want to break out of the looping structure altogether. What that says is we want to jump completely out of here and perform whatever execution comes down here after the for loop. Otherwise, we're going to come in here and just print out the values of j. And if we execute this guy, you're going to see that it only prints out our odd numbers like this. And instead of following this rule right here and printing the whole way up to 20, it instead hits this guy right here, which has a value of 15, and jumps out of the loop altogether. Another type of for loop that we have available, and of course all this code is available in the description, so go ahead and get that if you'd like. Let's come in here and create a customer, and what we can do here is use key valued pairs, where the key in this situation is going to be name. We'll get more into the specifics of this as the tutorial comes on, but I just wanted to show you another way of using a for type of loop. And then we have address like this, and 1, 2, 3 main. And then finally we'll go and create another one called balance, and let's say it's $50.50. What we're going to be able to do is cycle through these enumerable properties of an object. Like I said, we'll get more into objects here later on. And to do so, we'd use what is called the for in loop. So we'll be able to go, okay, in customer, it's going to be our keys. Throw in a document right, and then if we want to reference different parts of the customer, we're just going to throw our value of k inside of there. And if we reload this, you can see that it prints out all the different values that we have it stored inside of there. So that's how the for in block works. Now let's go and take a look at arrays. Now an array can actually hold multiple different values of multiple different data types, and arrays in JavaScript anyway are variable in size, so you'll be able to store multiple different values inside of here without defining a size. So let's say we want to do something like put some information about Tom Smith inside of here. We can keep adding information, and there we go. So Tom Smith lives at 123 Main, and he has a $120 balance. Let's go and work a little bit more with this. We're going to also be able to come in here and access different values. So let's say that we wanted to get the value of the first index inside of our array, and an index is basically just boxes inside of boxes. So here's one box, and here's another box, and this is going to have the index of 0, this is going to have the index of 1, and so forth and so on. Now let's go and get the very first value. You just say Tom Smith, and then inside of brackets you just put a 0, and that's how easy that is. And if we reload this, you can say first index is Tom Smith. It's very easy to add values. You just go Tom Smith, and then you would type in whatever the next index in the row would be, and then you could put something like an email address or something like that for our array. You can also overwrite values. So let's come in here again, Tom Smith. And in this situation, what we want to do is overwrite index 2 and fit everything else after index 2 without overwriting. So you're going to see exactly what I mean here, and we're going to do that with a tool called splice. So I'm going to override index 2. And then I'm going to put 1 inside of there, which means I only want to override one thing. So it said start at index 2 and override index 2, or one thing. And then it'll make everything else fit inside of there. And then I can come in and throw a whole bunch of different data pieces inside of here. So let's say I wanted to put Pittsburgh and PA inside of there. I could also come in here and delete the fourth index with splice. So we'll just go splice again, and we'll say 4 and 1. And once again, this is going to represent the index we want to delete, and the 1 here says we only want to delete one thing. So that's how that works. We can also come in here and convert this array into a string, actually in two different ways. So we can just go array like this, and then to convert it into a string, we would just go Tom Smith again, and we could say value of, or we could use the toString method of doing this. So this could be either toString or value of. Does the same thing, converts an array into a string. And also let's come in and convert an array into a string using a separator. So let's just go array again, and here what we're going to do is we'll say Tom Smith and join, and this is going to allow us to define that we want to put a comma and a space between each little part inside of there whenever it converts the array into a string. And if we reload it, you can see it does exactly that. So there's Tom Smith and his address and Pittsburgh, PA. You can see that we added all those guys together. And then once again here we're defining with the comma and the space instead. So it's a little bit neater for us to look at. It's also very easy to come in and delete an index. So we can go Tom Smith, and let's say we want to delete the third index. There we go, that's gone now. Sorting is also going to be very easy for us. Just type in sort, and we could type in reverse instead, and that would give us our reverse sort. However, this is going to be a sorting based off of alphabetical or letters instead of numbers. So if we wanted to do a sort based off of numbers, what we would do, first I'm going to come in here and create a brand new array. Now let's go and mess them up, of course. So how you would number, or how you would sort numbers inside of JavaScript is you're going to type in sort, and then you're going to come in here and go function x, y, and then you go return x minus y. And there's some math that goes into this calculation, but basically it's just saying it's going to be starting with sorting from 1 and then proceeding up with every value that comes thereafter. If you wanted to instead sort in descending order, you would put the y here and the x here, and this is just defining how these values are going to be compared to each other. So this is descending sorting, and this is ascending sorting, and that's just for numbers. And let's just output this just so you can see exactly what this looks like. So number array like that, and then just to show you the other way of converting the array into a string, we'll go numbers, and then we'll go toString. And if we reload it, you can see that it did indeed come in there and sort those properly. Now for some reason, if you'd like to come in here and combine these two different arrays together, you can just go var, and let's call this combined array. And to combine the numbers array with the Tom Smith array, we would just go concat or concatenate, which is the same thing as joining, and then throw Tom Smith in there, and there you go. Now they are combined. You could also come in, let's say you then wanted to remove the last item from the Tom Smith array. You could do so by just going pop, and that's going to remove just the last item. You also would be able to add items to the end, and to do that, you just go Tom Smith and push, and then let's throw some things on here like telephone number or something, and that would push those items onto the end of our array. You could come in and delete just the first item by using shift, and you could also come in and add items to the first index or the very beginning of the array with unshift. and then let's say we wanted to put Tom Smith in there again or whatever. Now we'll be able to come in here and cycle through all these items. I'm just going to use a for loop here, and we can go I is equal to 0, and while I is less than, and we wanted to do Tom Smith, and then we can go length like that. I'm going to cycle through it as long as there are items that we can work with. We want to increment that, and then we can come in and print that information out. So we'll say Tom Smith and throw the value of I in there, which is incrementing, and if we reload it, you can see everything pops up there on our screen. So there you go, guys. That's a whole bunch about how to use arrays inside of JavaScript. Now let's jump over and take a look at functions. Now, functions are going to allow you to eliminate repetitive code as well as provide for code reuse, so you can reuse code over and over again. And to define one, you just say function, and I'm going to create one here that's actually kind of useful. I'm going to define a function that's going to check if a value is inside of an array or not, and I'm going to call it inArray. And these are the parameters that are passed into it. So array to check, there's going to be an array passed into it. And then there's going to be a value passed inside of it, and it's going to use a for loop to cycle through the different values inside of the array and see if it can find the value that we're looking for. So array to check, and let's do length, and then we'll increment this value as well. And then we'll throw an if statement inside of here, and it's very simple. I'm just going to say array to check and take the incremented value like that, and then we're going to verify that the value is in there. If it is inside of there, we're going to say return true, which means true is going to be passed back as a value for whatever called this function. And you're going to see in a second what that looks like. And then if we get the whole way through here, before the function ends, this is the end of the function right here. If we get that far, that means we checked everything, and we can return a value of false in that situation. And now, based off of that, we can call this function for it to execute, and say something like inArray. And then to call or execute the function, we would just go in array like this. Pass in the random array. Actually, let's create the random array first. So variable rand array. So random array is passed inside of there. And then let's see if we want to check to see if the value of 4 is inside of there or not. And if we reload it, you can see that that comes back as true. However, if we would come back and put a 6 inside of there, you can see that comes back as false. So there's an example of a function with a whole bunch of things inside of there that actually does something useful. One thing that's very important to understand is, let's say that we have a function like this. Let's just call it times 2. It's just going to get a number, and it is going to return whatever is passed inside of it times 2. So let's go 2 like this, and then once again we're going to return the num passed inside of it times variable 2. There's good reason why I went inside of here and defined this right here rather than just typing 2 inside of there. I want to talk about something called a local variable. Now we have var2 right here. Let's see what happens if we try to print var2 out on our screen. So that should be pretty easy, right? So we'll go var2 like this, and we'll save that and reload it. Up, you can see nothing came back, and you can see down here in the console, var is not defined. var2, this guy right here, is what is called a local variable, which means it lives inside of this function. It doesn't live or exist anywhere outside of that function. So just be aware of, if you define something inside of a function, that doesn't necessarily mean it can be accessed outside of that function. Another thing that is useful is we will be able to pass functions inside as a parameter. So let's just create another one of these guys. Let's call this times 3 in this situation. Again, it's going to receive a value like this, and then it's going to return whatever was passed inside of it times 3 like this. Now what we're going to be able to do is come in here and create another function. And let's call this multiply, and it's going to be able to perform multiple different calculations based off of the function passed inside of it. So there that is. This doesn't need to be called func. It can be called anything. I just called it func. Now what it's going to be able to do is go return and use that function that was passed inside of there to perform operations on the number that was passed inside of there. And you're going to see here, if we would go 3 times 15 is equal to, we could then come in and go multiply and pass in times 2 as well as 15, and we could also come in and do the exact same thing 4 times 3. And if we reload that, you're going to see that they perform different calculations. That's extremely useful to be able to pass functions around inside of there. Another thing we can do is we can create things called function expressions. And let's just go in here and create this. Let's call it triple is equal to function num and then all this is going to do is return num times 3. What this is simply doing is assigning the function to the variable. What's really cool about this is you'd actually be able to take this function right here and store it inside an array. So you could have an array of functions that you could cycle through and perform different operations with, which is really kind of neat. So for example, let's come down here and let's use this again. Let's just paste this inside of there, and you could say that let's just change this to 45 is equal to multiply, and then here we'll change this to triple and pass 45 inside of there. And much like this other calculation we performed, you can see that we can perform that calculation as well. Another thing we can do is we could actually return, let's just keep this all on the same page, we could actually receive a variable number of arguments into our function, so we have no idea how many arguments are getting passed in, and we'll be able to still work with them. We don't put any parameters inside of there in this situation. Create a variable called sum, give it a value of 0 to start off. Now we're going to create a for loop, and we can go while I is equal to 0 to start out, and we're going to cycle through as long as we have arguments to work with. And to access the arguments that are passed into getSum, we have no idea how long they are, but we can go arguments get length like this and find out, and we'll be able to cycle through all those different guys as long as they exist. And we could do something like sum plus is equal to, and then to access the arguments, we can go arguments I, and then of course after we get outside of this we could return the value for sum, and then jump down here and let's call this just to prove that it does indeed work. So we could say sum, and here we're going to call getSum, and there we are. Now close that off and reload, and you can see it performed those calculations even though it had no idea how many of these numbers were going to get passed inside of it. You'd also be able to come in here and return a variable number of arguments by using an array. So let's create another function. Let's call this times 2. So times 2 like this, and let's just have an array gets passed inside of times 2. Create a new empty array is equal to, and there's an empty array for us to work with. And then we're going to create another for loop, and we're going to go I, let's send the array, so the total number of array items inside of here, and we're going to cycle through all of them. And now we can go new array and push on to the end of my array, all of those different values on there, times 2, and then of course after we're done we can return the array. Now we'll be able to go document write, and we'll say something like array doubled, and now we'll be able to come in and go times 2, and then we can pass an array variable name or whatever we want. I'm just going to keep this simple, and let's say we want to convert it into a string so we can print it out on the screen. You'll be able to see it nice, and reload it, and you can see that it went and doubled every single item in that array and printed it out on the screen. And the final thing I'm going to talk about are recursive functions. And a recursive function is just a function that calls itself, and the best example of this is calculating a factorial. So a number is going to be passed inside of this guy, and to calculate a factorial, what we're going to do is we're going to say if num that's passed inside of it is less than or equal to 1, we're going to return a value of 1 from that guy. Otherwise, I have to go else, we are going to return number times, and we're going to call the function factorial again for number minus 1, and that's going to allow us to be able to perform factorial calculations. So we could say something like factorial of 4, and then call factorial and pass in the value of 4 for this. So I'm going to show you exactly how this is working here in one moment. And if we reload it, you can see the factorial of 4 is equal to 24, and you can see right here exactly how that is going to operate. So the very first time it goes through the factorial function, right like this, it's going to have a value of 4. That value of 4 is going to end up being right here for the num, and then it's going to have factorial of 3 is going to be passed in because this is 4 minus 1. And this is going to continue on and on and on, right up until the point in which the factorial of 1 is passed in. Then it's going to sort of climb back upside the ladder. So it got to the end. It's not going to call a factorial function again, and every factorial function has to have a way out. That's the way out right there. So you can see right here, 2 times 1 is going to give me a value of 2. This 2 right here is going to go up here. Then we're going to have that multiplied times 3 to get a value of 6. That 6 is going to jump up here, which is going to be multiplied times the original number passed in, called 4. and that's going to give us our final value. So there is a whole bunch of ways to work with functions inside of JavaScript. Now I'm going to talk about event handling. Okay, so I'm going to cover a lot about event handling because that's very, very important. So we're going to create a function here, and I'm just going to call this open alert, and I'm going to do some inline JavaScript, and then we'll call some functions and do all kinds of other different things. And this alert is going to get a message, and it's going to open up that message in an alert. And if you want to get access to all of the different events you could find, here is a link to that, and I'll of course have that in the description so you'll be able to jump over there and look at all the different events, but I'm going to show you a ton of them in this tutorial. So let's say that we wanted to come in here and we'll create a link, and this link is going to call some JavaScript code to execute. What you're going to want to do is first off go JavaScript and :void and 0 like this, and then we're going to say on click. So whenever they click on this link, we want to call our alert function and have it execute. So this is a way of calling outside JavaScript for it to execute, and I'll show you some inline Java as well. So let's just say hello like this, and then we'll come in and close that off. And of course we want this outside of our script tag, so let's throw it down here, and you can see say hello is right here. If we click on it, an alert pops up that says hello. Okay, so that's one way to execute code from inside of here. And you can also see here that if we do not have this guy inside of here and we reload it and click on hello, what it's going to do is if you were farther down inside of the page and you clicked on that, it's going to reload the page. So one way to keep it from reloading the page is to put JavaScript void inside of there. That keeps everything nice and it won't have the page jumping all over the place. So now what we can do is we could also come in and do another one of these guys. So let's just copy this. And in this situation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this function that I have up inside of this script and have it execute instead. So I'm going to have onClick again, but in this situation, I'm going to call open alert, which is the name of my function. And here I'll say something a little bit different like hi, and we can have this just be say something. And if we reload that, you're going to see say something pops up. We click on that, it's going to say hi, how are you, like that. And if we click on say hello, it's still going to open up hello. So here we are calling or performing some inline JavaScript, and here we're actually calling our function, and you can see exactly how that operates. Now let's come in here and do a little bit more advanced stuff. So what I'm going to do here is show you a whole bunch of different ways of handling events. We can perform different operations on mouse over, and that just means that they put the mouse over top of this link and we want to do something. Well, one of the things we want to do is, let's say we want to change the style of this link. We can change the style right like this. We can change it to red, for example. Whenever they put the mouse over it, it's going to change it to red. We could also have an event trigger whenever the mouse moves off of my link, and to do that you call onMouseOut, and whenever they take the mouse off of there, I'm going to say I want to change the style color again, but this time make sure you keep all of these little periods inside of here. Let's say in this situation I want to change the color to blue. We could also perform a different action if they double click on our link. Do this, and in that situation let's say we want to change the text, and I'm going to put single quotes inside of here so it doesn't get confused, and double quotes close that off. And then we could do an on mouse down, which means they pressed and held down on the mouse on top of our link. And this one's going to be text again, keep it simple, close that off. And then also on mouse up equal to, and then we can say this text, and then that'll close that off. And then let's just give this a name like make me red and reload it. And you can see when I put the mouse over it, it turns red. Whenever I pull off of it, it turns blue. If I double click on it, you can see it's going and popping a little message up here. You double clicked me. You can't really see it because of this. Here you can see when I press down on it, don't press too hard, pops up, and whenever I take it off, it says thank you. So a whole bunch of other different things we can work with. Now let's go and mess around with some inputs and see exactly how we can mess with those. So we'll go input type is equal to text, and we can say something like on change event. There's another event. In the situation in which there is a change in my input element, I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call it data entered. And if I want to get the value that was entered, I can go document dot get element by ID, and then I just tell it whatever the ID of the element that I want to pull the text from is, and that's random input. And then if I want to actually get the value that is inside of there, I just say value, right like that. Then before I close off those double quotes, I could go alert, and I could do something like user typed. And then if I wanted to output what they typed, I could go data entered, and let's spell data entered right. And then we could close that off and put a semicolon inside of there and reload it. And you can see right here, there is the input, and I could say hello, whatever you. There it is. And it's been changed, and the onChange event triggers whenever I leave, and you can see right there it says user typed hello you. It's another way to get information and events and how to work with these different HTML elements. You could also mess around with some ways of finding out what keys that they clicked on the keyboard. So let's create a form here and the action and have it just go nowhere because we're just playing around here. And I can go ID, and let's make the name of this sample form like that, and then inside of it let's throw some input boxes, and let's give this an ID equal to character input, and of course this is going to be text like that. And you can see we can play around, have some of them be single quotes, some of them be double quotes, whatever you'd like. And then let's throw a paragraph tag inside of this as well. ID is equal to, and this is going to put my key data for the keys that they typed on the keyboard, and I don't need to do anything with that. And what the heck, I might as well also show you some other neat events we can do. Do another input type, and this one's going to be equal to submit that, and let's go and also throw in a reset button. There's all kinds of different events we can catch. So there's a reset. Let's do a couple more. Let's go image and play around with some images as well. There's a ping file, and we'll give this the ID equal to logo. There's an image file we'll be able to trigger some events on. Let's go and get some button events. So I'm going to show you all the JavaScript for these all at one time. So we'll call this logo button, and then we'll go and create another input box. We're going to call this mouse input. Yeah, I'm going to show you some ways of pulling some mouse events off here as well. Type is equal to text, and let's have the size of this be equal to 30. And I'm also going to show you the mouse X and Y positions so we can track how they change. So throw another input box inside of there, and then we'll also show the mouse Y position on the screen. So as the mouse moves around on the screen, these are going to be updated. And then what we're going to do is let's go and open up another script window here underneath of it. It's always a good idea to keep your script code underneath of the HTML. And we'll just create this, and let's make this stuff actually work. So I'm going to create a function here first, and it's called getCharacter, and it's going to catch an event that we're going to be able to do some things with. And we're going to assign some different events to trigger this getCharacter function right here. What we want to do here first is we want to call event which like this, and this is going to return the key or the mouse button that was clicked. And that's what event which returns. So we want to verify that if this function is called, that is not equal to null, which means it has no value. And if it does, we're going to return string, and then we're going to call from character code and get the key code that they clicked on. And this is going to be here for Internet Explorer. Else if event.which is not equal to 0 and event character code is not equal to 0. In that situation, we want to return string, and we're going to call from character code again, except in this situation, we're going to call event which. And this is going to work for all the other browsers. Else, if we get down here, then we know we have a problem. We're just going to return null. And the way that we would get down to this point is if they clicked on something on their keyboard, a character that doesn't have a character code that we can output on the screen. So that's what this covers. So right here we're handling for Internet Explorer, and right here we are handling for every other browser, and then here they clicked on some special character we can't work with. So that's what's going on there. Now we are going to assign some events that we want to trigger or we want to pay attention to. To do that, we're going to go document, get element by ID once again, and character input is going to be the guy that we want to trigger here. So character input, which is this guy up here. So we're looking at the character input element, and we're saying that if the key is pressed, we want to do something. And the thing we want to do is we want to call this function right here, and it's going to get passed event information. We're going to create a new variable, character, and we're going to pass into our getCharacter function we just created right here, event or window event. Again, this is for older versions of Internet Explorer we're trying to work here. And we're going to say if not a character, we want to return false. And that means a special key was clicked once again. Otherwise, what we want to do, if they clicked on something that does work, we want to go and get element by ID again. And this time we want to come up here to the key data, this paragraph right here, and input or output some information about the character that they clicked on. So just pay reference to key data like that. And what we want to do in this situation is a paragraph. So we want to put some information inside of there, so we have to use inner HTML. If it's a tag, we want to use inner HTML. Otherwise, if it's an input element or something like that, we would use value. And we'll just say character, and then keep this simple, was clicked. And then after we get through this, we can say return true. And if we rewind this, there's a whole bunch of different information right here. And this is the input box that we just put the on key press event on side of there. And you can see F was clicked, G was clicked, J was clicked. We can go and do something, see if we can find something. Yeah, I don't know. There's something here on the keyboard that it's not going to recognize. There, it didn't do anything that time. Okay, so that's how that works. Now let's go and play around with some other different events that we can work with here. Let's say we want to change text whenever the input is going to gain focus. So once again, this guy right here, when it gains focus, when it means I clicked inside of there, I want to type something inside of there, I want to do something, no problem. We can just go to document, get element by ID once again. And in this situation, we are going to be putting this on character input, just like before. You can add multiple different events to just one thing. So we can say on focus, like that, whenever somebody clicks in it. Well, then we want to execute some additional functions. So an event gets passed inside of there once again. And this time we want to go document and, of course, get element by ID. You can do that over and over and over again. And this time, call key data, that, just like we did right here. We're going to put some information inside this paragraph tag, and this again we're going to use inner HTML is equal to, and then we'll just put something like input gained focus, and you can see input gained focus pops up right there. We could also catch if the user ever came in here and selected any text, and to do that, let's just leave this be character input and on select. And in a situation in which text is selected in the input, we could come down here. And again, this is going to update the little paragraph we have there. And we could say something like text selected and reload that. And we can just type some text in there. You can see how that's working. And then like this, text selected. There's a whole bunch of different events. Let's play around with our logo here and have it do a couple different things. Again, pretty much exactly the same thing, except this time we're going to target that, and it is called logo button. And we're going to say on click. So when our logo button is clicked on, this guy right here, we can go and get our logo, and we can go up here. You can see right here where I have show. I have it defined that it's going to display, and then I'm going to have another one that's going to hide the logo. So just a little bit of CSS inside of there. So if I want to assign that class name to it, just go class name is equal to, and you can also come in here and do it this way, and equal to, and have it be show, and that means we're going to have to go and make it disappear. I'll show you how to do that. Let's come in again, and this time we're going to target our logo, which has the ID of logo, and we're going to say on mouse over. We want to do something. Let's have it go and change a couple different things. So like this, and get element, and we're going to target the logo in this situation, and we're going to change the source on this. So source is equal to, and then I'm going to of course have to have a different version of the logo to bring inside of there, but I have another version of the logo that is going to be horizontal position, so it's going to switch from horizontal to vertical whenever you put the mouse over top of it. And then also I can have another thing. Let's target mouse input, this. And in this situation, it's an input that we're going to be changing. So I have to change that from inner HTML to value. And then we could say something like mouse over image. So we can display that and make sure we go in here and put ping inside of there. That caused a little bit of a bug. Reload. And now you can see it jumped from horizontal to vertical. and we can go get logo, see what that does. Doesn't do anything yet. Let's go and add a couple more events here. Let's just copy this, and let's say whenever they take the mouse off, that it's going to switch back to the way that it was. So again, mouse out instead of over. And here we'll change our logo back to its original form, which is just ntt logo.ping. And mouse input again, and value, and then we'll say something like mouse left image, reload it, and now we can switch it back and forth, and you can also see this is changing down here. Let's go and also make this disappear whenever the image is clicked on. So let's go and get this, throw that inside of there, change this to hidden. Remember the CSS that I had there? Sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit and doing this out of my head. So now whenever they go and click on let's make it the logo itself. That's going to make the logo disappear. Logo disappeared, get logo comes back. Now let's go set it up so that whenever the mouse moves around on our document, that it's going to automatically update the mouse X and mouse Y input text boxes we have here. So to do that, we go document, and then we'll go body, and we're looking for another event called onMouseMove, and we'll call function. Let's make this E just to keep it simple. Then we're going to have to do some things here for Internet Explorer. E equal to E or window event. Now what we're going to want to do is get the page X and page Y positions, which are going to be the mouse positions relative to the HTML document. So we'll go page X is equal to E.page X, and then we'll also go variable and create the same thing for page Y is equal to E.page Y. Then we're going to verify that page X is equal to undefined. In that situation, what we're going to do is go page X is equal to E client X plus document body. Not something you have to memorize by any stretch of the imagination. This is something that you would use. It's an algorithm you would use if you want to track mouse positions. And then you just go document dot document element dot scroll left, and then you're going to do the same thing to calculate the page Y positions. Page Y, sort of crazy stuff you need to do to make sure it works on every browser. And then here, this is going to be scroll top, and then this is going to be scroll top as well. And after you have all of those calculated, then you're going to go document, get element by ID, and here we'll go mouse X, which is the guy that I want to target. And then I specifically want to change the value for that because it's an input element to the value of page X, which we just calculated. And then we'll do exactly the same thing for the Y position. So we'll change this to Y, and we'll change this to Y. And then to close off this function, put a semicolon here at the end. And you can see right here, as I move the mouse around, the X and Y positions are changing right there. Okay, so another interesting thing we can track. Another thing we could do is clear all of our inputs down here. And how we'd do that is just go document, get element by ID again, and we'll go clear inputs on click equal to, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to create a function again, and there is an event. Input elements is equal to documents, get elements by tag name. Another way we can target all tags, elements by tag name, and we're going to say that we want to clear all of our input elements. Now what we'll do is we'll cycle through all of these different input elements and delete them. So another interesting sort of thing. I'm just trying to think of a whole bunch of different things that I can show you how to do that you might need to do someday. And we're going to do length as well, and to cycle through them. And then we'll go if input elements I, that's an array, dot type is equal to text. If it's a text input element, we want to zero that out. So input elements again, target the value for it, and then make that value equal to nothing. And to do this, I'm going to jump out, make sure you get outside of your script tag, and I'm going to create a brand new button. And this button's whole purpose is to clear all of those input elements. So make sure you give it the same exact name, clear inputs. Close that off, and we'll just call this clear inputs. Close off the button tag, and now that we have that, save it and reload it. And you can see here all this different information is popping up here. Throw some more in there, and if I click on clear inputs, it clears all the inputs. Okay, so there's a whole bunch about event handling. Now let's take a look at element styling. Now, if you want to see all the different options you have in regards to styling, this is the website you can go to right there. And of course, that's also in the description for this video, or you can pause it and copy that down. I'm going to go ahead here and create a div that we're going to be working with. And then I'm going to create a whole bunch of different buttons that we're going to be able to click on, and they're going to change what's up inside of this little div we have here. So down inside of the script area, once again, let's set it up so that we can come in here and change the background color on a click. So document, and again, you're just going to be doing get elements by ID, and here I'm going to specifically target change background color whenever this is clicked on. So that guy right there. I'm going to say when that button is clicked on, I want to do certain things, and what I want to do, call a function to execute event, and then I'm going to go document, get element by ID, and I'm going to target sample div. If I want to change the style on it, just go style. I want to change the background color. Again, the link to things like background color I just talked about there a second ago. So this is where you find all those things out. And let's go and give it a color, and that's how easy that is to do. And we're going to do similar things for all the other different buttons. And this one's going to be change background image. So we need a background image here. Let's go down here, throw that inside of there. Again, sample div, except this time we are going to target the background image. Background, change this from color to image, just that easily. And then we'll come in here and point at a background image that we think is going to work. Of course, you're going to use URL again, and you can throw whatever background image you want inside of there. I have one saved on my computer I want to use, and we can reload this. Background color, you can see that change, background image, and make sure that's double quotes, and you can see the background image changed on that. We're going to be doing similar things with all the other different buttons. Change border style, that's this guy right here. Let's copy that, and then this guy is going to be border style, and then let's just make this solid. There we go. Now let's handle the other buttons here, and then we can play with them all at one time. Change border width, paste that in there. This is going to be border width, and let's make this thick. And then just to do one more, let's also come in and change the border color. Again, we're going to just get this guy right here, paste that in there, change this to border color, and then we'll just change this to blue to keep it simple. Save it, reload. You can say background color works, background image works, border style works, border popped up there, border width, see it got a little bit thicker, and border color, and now it's blue. So there's a whole bunch of different ways we can play around with styles, and please go to that link that I showed you previously and experiment with all these different styles because it's very cool. Now I'm going to talk about manipulating the DOM. Okay, and by talking about manipulating the DOM, what I mean is I'm going to take these divs and all of these other different elements as you see right here. I went and just copy and pasted them in there, and I'm going to show you how to target those in new and interesting ways and manipulate them and so forth and so on. So you can see I just have a div, I have an image, I have a whole bunch of paragraphs, and I have a whole bunch of buttons here, and I'm going to go in and target those different things and make things happen. So we're going to be doing it in much the same way, document and write in this situation. First thing I want to talk about is how to get the current web page that we're on, and I'll put that on the screen. Of course, we'd be able to do other things. So let's say current, we would just type in window, location, and href, and there we go. We'll be able to get the current URL, and let's go and do a couple other things that are similar to this. We could also come in here and get the current host, and we just change this guy right here to host name, and likewise we could get the current path, and for that we would just come in here and change this to path name. And if we reload this, you're going to see all those different things that we threw inside of here, but then you're also going to see the current URL, the current host, and the current path. I'm using a file on my system, so that's the reason why you don't see host right here, but that's the way that would work. Now let's go in and let's take a look at how we can change a site on a button click. We could of course have a change of site using multiple different other actions or events, but I'm going to use a button click right now. So I'm going to point at the button called Go to Google, and I'm going to say on click. As you can guess, pretty much everything is using those same events that I've already covered. And in here, what I'm going to do is call a function, and it's going to get an event passed to it. And then I'm going to do window.location.hreference, and we can change the hreference. Just make sure you put the HTTP inside of there. And now whenever you click on that guy, it's automatically going to jump you over to Google. Let's go and create a couple more things here. I could save that. Go to Google, and you're going to see it's going to take me to Google as it did right there. We can also come in and let's say we want to go forward a page. You're going to be doing the same thing. Document, get element by ID like this, and let's target forward page, which is the ID for that little button there. Going to do pretty much the same thing. On click equal to, and then we'll just call function again. Pass in the event. Open up our curly brackets, and then we'll just say history and forward. And that will allow us to jump backwards and forwards through history. And also we're going to be able to go in here and also jump back. And you can probably guess exactly how that's going to work. We're just going to change this to back. And then we're going to get this button right here, which is named back page. And we'll just paste that in there instead of forward page. Another thing we could do is we can jump multiple different places through history, which is the browser history where the user has been. And how we would do that if we wanted to jump backwards through history is we would go history.go and -2 if we wanted to jump backwards 2 places in history. And if we wanted to go forward 2 places in history, we just change that to 2. Let's go and also talk about reloading the page. We can do pretty much the same thing here. Let's just say whenever they click the guy called reload, then we want to come over and leave all this be exactly the same, except for this guy right here, we're going to change this to window.location.reload, and that's going to reload the browser, throw true inside of there. And if we come in here and rewind this, you can already have gone over how to go to Google. We can go forward a page, we can go back a page, and then you could jump on reload and it's going to reload the page. So there's a whole bunch of different things we can do with the browser. It's kind of cool. Go and do a couple more things here. Now what I'm going to focus in on is actually grabbing elements and styling them. So let's say that I wanted to get all of the paragraph elements that I have on my page. I'm going to store those inside of an array. What I'm going to do is go get elements by tag name. That's going to give me every single whatever I put inside of here, and I'm going to say paragraph in this situation. So those are all stored in an array. Now if I'd want to come in here and style one of these paragraphs that's stored inside of here, like let's say the second one, I could go background color like this and give it a color like that and reload, and you're going to see that the background color changed for that guy, but it didn't change for the other paragraphs. You can see where the paragraphs are. So there's a paragraph here and there's a paragraph there. And there's another paragraph right there. So you can see how those are styled and how we can target them and grab them and throw them in arrays and do all kinds of other things. Now let's say we want to target the HTML of a document. So we'll go document dot, and here I'm going to use child nodes. So I'm going to grab the second child node on our page and change the background color for this as well and reload it, and you can see everything colored itself. And the reason why is I basically targeted the HTML tag, which is going to be the first child on that or on the document as a whole. We can also go and get even more specific with grabbing these child nodes. Like let's say we wanted to change the color of the first child in our sample div 2, this guy right here, this whole entire div. How would we do that? Well, we could go sample div 2 first off and go document dot get element by ID and then throw in samp div 2. And now what we'll be able to do is go samp div 2 child nodes, and let's say we want to grab the first child. We'll just go 0 inside of there and then style, and let's just change the background color again because that's worked for us in the past. And here we'll just go F and reload it, and you can see that that's got selected there as well. And if we look over here at what we selected, you can see that we selected the very first child inside of this, which is this paragraph right here, and it's going to go and select everything inside of there. Now let's say we want to style the first child of the sample div's first child, which would this guy. So what we want to do is we want to specifically come in here and get the first child of this paragraph tag, which we just grabbed, which is this guy right here. Well, we just come down here, basically going to do the same type of thing. Go and select this, copy, paste that inside of there, and then we can structure these or chain them. So child nodes once again, and here we'll put one inside of there, and here we'll change the color up a little bit so it sticks out, and reload, and you can see that it went in there and grabbed that emphasis tag that we have right here. So that's how we grab all those guys. One thing that's very important to remember, however, is that JavaScript can get confused by text nodes whenever they're trying to target elements, and text nodes are basically white space. And let me show you an example of how we can target or find text nodes. So I'm gonna come in here, let's just do a document write again. There's a way to find out if something's a text node or not. So I'll say node type, and then let's do the sample div too, and then we'll go child nodes like this, and then we'll target 0 child node, and then we'll target another child node again, child nodes, and let's make this also 0 like this, and then after that go node type. And if we do that and reload it, it's going to tell us that this is a type 3 node, the first child of sample div as well as the first child of that one. And this is also telling us that this is a text node. Now if you go and try to style a text node, you're not going to be able to do it, which is going to give you an error. Now there's different ways that you're going to be able to handle this. If it comes back as 1, that means it's a non-text node, just so you know that. But there's different ways you can handle this. Basically, in your HTML, you can come in and eliminate all the different text nodes inside of here, which is going to be done either through deleting all of the white space or by using a minimizer, or you can just simply use child nodes. So there's a downfall in that if you go in and delete all the white space and get rid of all the text nodes, you're going to be able to do things like last child and know that it's going to work well on every single browser. Another one would be first child, but I personally just would prefer to come in and just use these node types or to target things using IDs. You can do it either way, just understand that you're going to have to eliminate white space or use a minimizer to be 100% positive that you're going to be able to use these other different intricate ways of selecting these nodes. And I personally find I'm not really losing out on anything by just using child nodes to select everything or by just putting IDs on all my elements and selecting them that way. Another thing we can do is let's just copy this, paste this inside of here. We can get a node name. So we'll just go node name. And let's leave this B00 and all this other different stuff, except change this to node name like that. Reload the screen, and you can see right there it comes back as a text node. However, let's go and get one of the guys that we know works, like this one right here, and 1. So leave that B0, change this to 1, and if we do that, you can see that it comes back as EM. So there's different ways to go in and target and grab all those different guys, and it's just something to think about in regards to how browsers are able to parse through your HTML and how you can work with it and try to avoid errors. Another thing we can do is come in here and change element attributes. So let's target our logo. I'm going to call this entity logo2 equal to. And we're going to be able to, of course, get the element by ID like that. And the ID for that is logo. So we'll just change that to logo, or logo2. And now we can come in here and check different attributes. So we can go in here and do document write again. And we could verify that the logo, for example, has an alt. So has alt. And to do that, just go entity logo2 and go has attribute, and then the attribute that we are specifically looking for, which is alt. You could have this inside of an if structure, which if it says, hey, we have that attribute, well then you could go in and change it. Otherwise, you would have an error if you tried to change an attribute that doesn't exist. And why don't we just go in here and also go and change that attribute. So entity logo2 again, and set the attribute pretty easily. Set the alt and then break statement, and then we could also then get that attribute once again, paste that in there, and we could say something like logo alt value, and to get the attribute just change this from has attribute to get attribute. And what the heck, we can also come in here and just get all the attributes for an element, and I'll show you exactly what this looks like when it prints out. Let's go attribute list, and you can get every single attribute an element has by going get element by ID again, and then we're targeting the logo too. And then to get every attribute, just put attributes at the end of that. And then we'll be able to go in here and cycle through all the attributes with a for loop. Trying to show you a whole bunch of different crazy things here you might somehow use or find some reason to use. Of course, we would just get the length of that array, cycle through all of those, and then we would come in here and print them out on the screen. So document, and we could just do attribute, make sure you throw this inside of quotes, and maybe we want to attribute 1, let's number all of them, and then we could do something like this. And then to get the individual attribute, go attribute list like this, and I inside of there, and then we could get the node name, which you just saw a second ago, and then we could divide that and also come in here, attribute list, I, and then in this situation we could say node value. Alright, I did a whole bunch of things. Let's see what the result is. You can see right here, does the logo have an alt? Comes back as true. and let's go and see the logo. There's the logo. You can see it does have an alt. Logo alt value doesn't come back here in this situation. And the reason why is I went and threw a break statement inside of there. Sorry about that. Let's say entity logo 2, like that. Now it's going to show a value. You can see there it is. And then we cycle through every single attribute that was there and checked whether they were defined or not. And it didn't show any of those because this needs to be uppercase. Sorry about that. A couple little errors slipping in here, and now you can see all of them show up. So pretty useful stuff. You're also going to be able to come in here and add in different elements into the HTML page. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a paragraph 3 element. And to do that, you just go document and create element. And then you're going to tell it what type of element you want to create. Well, I want to create a paragraph element. And that's how easy that is to do. Now we can also, of course, come in here and set attributes on these guys. So let's just go in here, set attribute, and let's set the ID. And then let's come over, and the value that we want to set for this is paragraph. That's how easy it is to set that attribute. We're then going to also be able to change the inner HTML on this. Inner HTML equal to, and then let's just go and grab some nonsense text here. Let's just grab this guy right here, throw that inside of there. And then if we want to append this new element that we just created to the sample div that we already have here, we can just go append child and then throw in paragraph 3, the new element that we just created, and you're going to see it shows up right there. There it is. We could also come in here and do a similar thing. Just go sample div 3 again. And if we want to insert it in a specific place, we would go insert before, and then we go paragraph 3, and we're going to say exactly where we want it to go. So it goes sample div 2 and child nodes, put it in there in the very first position. And if we rewind that, you can see it pops right inside of there. So that's how we can put in different child elements or create different elements, and a whole bunch of information in regards to how we can manipulate the DOM. Now I'm going to take a look at object-oriented JavaScript. Now, the idea behind object-oriented programming is we're trying to model the attributes and the capabilities of real-world objects directly inside of our code. So let's say we want to create one here, and it's going to be called customer 1. Well, what we're going to do first is define the attributes for this customer. And so let's say John Smith is an attribute for the name, and then we can also go and get the street and the city and the state and the email and a balance. Okay, so these are different attributes that customer 1 has a name, street, city, and all those other different things. Now that brings us to the capabilities. One of the capabilities that our customer will have is to pay down their balance. And in JavaScript, this is exactly how you would create that said function, and it's going to get passed an amount that was paid to pay down the balance. And then to refer to the object itself, we would say this in this situation, and then we could subtract and assign back to the value of balance, which is balance, it's referring to this right here, whatever the amount paid was. So that's how easy it is to go in and create functions inside of JavaScript. Another thing we could do is add to balance. And once again, we're just going to create a function directly inside of here. I'm going to show you a couple other different ways we can do this here in a moment. And in this situation, we'll do the absolute opposite, which means the balance, and let's add to the balance whatever the amount charged was that was passed into that. So that's how we define the attributes for our objects, as well as how we would define the capabilities or functions for our object. And you just want to make sure you separate all those with a comma. And then finally, after the object has been completely defined, put a semicolon after the curly bracket. Now we're going to be able to come in here and actually get the values that are stored inside of here. So let's just document right again, and we'll say something like that we want to get the customer name. And to get the customer name, we just refer to the object. So it's customer1, like we have there, and a dot and name. And just like that, we can go and output that value on our screen. We can also come in and change a value just by going customer1 again, and street like this equal to, and let's just say he moved to 215 Main Street. There you go. You just change that value. And if we wanted to go in here and print out the street, of course, we would just go and put street inside of here instead of name. We're also going to be able to come in and add properties to this. So let's say we wanted to add a new one. Well, we'll just type in our new one, which is going to be country in this situation. Say US, and then print that out on the screen. And of course, just refer to country. And we can also come in and delete different attributes. We'll just go customer1, just refer to our object. and to whatever property we want to delete. Another thing we can do, I showed you this previously before when we were covering for loops. You could also be able to come in through here and cycle through all the different properties for our objects using the for in block. And we just say the object we want to work with, and then we could say something like if customer 1 has property, has own property, like that. Well, then we want to print it out on screen. So we'll go document right, and whatever the property is, and reload it, and you can see right there customer name and all that information, and then we cycle through all the different properties that are available for our object and printed those out on the screen. Another thing we could do is check if a property is in an object. So for example, we could check if there is a property called name inside of our object, and we would surround it with double quotes and then go in customer 1. That's how we would verify if it existed, and you can see it comes back as true. And we could also come in and interact with an object using a function. So let's say function and get info, for example, and this one's going to be past our customer. And then let's come in here and output all this information. There you can see I outputted the name, and it's basically going to come out as a sentence whenever we pass in an object into the getInfo function, and then call that function by going getInfo and passing in any object inside of it, and then output that on our screen. And there you can see John Smith lives at, and there's all the information we have on John Smith and how it printed out right there. Now let's go in here and actually call the methods. Also very easy to do. Customer 1, and let's say the customer 1 decides he wants to pay down his balance. Well, he's going to pass in the amount that he wants to pay down on the balance, but then let's find out later on that he actually wants to buy something else and he wants to add to his balance. And why don't we just go in here and grab this guy again and paste that in there to show you exactly how that changed. And there you can see the new balance is $110. And that's all well and good, but very often what we want to do is want to create generic objects so that we can create many different objects rather than just deal with one object over and over again. Well, how we're going to be able to do that is with what is called an object constructor. And how you create one, you want to give your object a name, and it's normally going to be uppercase letters. And you're just going to define everything that's going to be passed inside of this object whenever it's created. So there you go. There's all the different things that we're going to need to create our custom customer object. Then we're just going to go this name, which refers to this object's name, and then we'll do exactly the same thing for all of the other different attributes or elements inside of here. You can see instead of being separated with commas, these are ending with a semicolon. We're also going to be able to come in here and create functions for this guy. So pay down balance, just like we had before, is equal to, and we're going to say function amount paid is going to be passed inside of it, and it's going to do the same exact thing. It's just going to change the balance for this, the amount paid, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing. Well, make sure you put a semicolon at the end of this. Then we're going to do exactly the same thing for adding to the balance. So add to balance, and then change this to amount charged. And then here we'll just go and do an addition in amount charged, and there we go. So that's how we create an object constructor. Now to create a customized object, we're just going to go variable, and let's just call this customer 2. We're going to go new, and we're going to call the name of the object we want to create. Then we'll just put all that information inside of there for our new customized customer object and put a semicolon at the end of it. And if we want to call the function for customer 2, we could do something like add to balance and go $15.50. And it's going to work in exactly the same way. And we're going to be able to call and output information for this customer object just like we did with the previous customer object. Now let's say that we wanted to have what are normally referred to as a static variable for our object, which is going to be a variable that's going to have a value that is going to be shared between every single object that is ever created for the customer type. How we would create that is by creating what is called a shared prototype property. So we could do something like, let's say we have all of these different customers that have been created, and just on a whim we want to give them the ability to use credit or to make a charge on account or hold a balance or whatever you want to call it. Well, we're going to go prototype, and then we're going to define whatever this shared value would be. So is credit available? And we're going to say that all of these customers have credit available by default. And then on one line, if we wanted to remove credit from all of them, we would just type in false, and then that would remain true. But let's give them all credit right now. And like I said, this is going to be a shared value for every single customer type. Now, if we have shared variables, it would also be nice to have shared functions. And to create one of those, we're just going to come in here and this is actually referred to as a prototype method. Again, we're going to go customer, and then we're going to go prototype, and then we're going to give the name of the shared function, and then define this function. That's not going to get any attributes passed inside of it, and it's going to return all the information on our customer. And you can see right there that it returns all of those, and then at the very end of it we want to put a semicolon. Now what that's going to allow us to do is to go in here and go document write, and then just go customer2, and toString is the guy we got there. And what I actually did is override the toString method that all objects have. This is how easy it is to override a method. You just do that, pretty simple. And if I reload it, you can see Sally Smith lives at 234 Main, and all of that information prints out on our screen. So that is a whole bunch of information on how to deal with objects inside of JavaScript. Now let's take a look at form validation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a whole bunch of inputs inside of here, and I'm going to validate whether they are good information or not good information. So I'm going to create a div here first off. Then inside of this div, I'm going to say something like enter your name, and then I'm going to go in here and create an input box. Let's give us a little bit of room because I'm going to make this a little bit complicated so that you learn some information here. I'm going to give this the ID equal to name. Let's go and give it name also. This of course is going to be a text input. Let's go and give it a size of 30 columns. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on blur, which means when they leave the input box, I want something to happen. You can leave it like that, or you can leave it like this, or you can do whatever you'd like. I'm going to say I want to call a function called isTheFieldEmpty, and I'm going to verify whether this field is empty or not. I'm going to pass in the element itself, the input element, using this in this situation. And then what I'm going to do is go document get element by ID, and this is going to be called name help. This is going to be a span we're going to create here in a second that is going to show an error message if we have something wrong with the input the user left. And I'm going to create that span right now. So span, give it an ID equal to name help, of course, just like we just mentioned here a second ago. And then I'm going to close this span right like that. And then the div closes. So what we got to do here is, just to review, whenever they leave the input text box after they entered something or didn't enter something, we're going to call a function called isTheFieldEmpty. We're going to pass in a reference to the input box itself that we're going to then verify if it indeed is empty, and we're also going to pass a reference to name help, which is this span that is going to show an error message if indeed the field is empty. We want to warn them and say, hey, we need this field in. Now this guy right here is actually going to go outside of the script area, so it's going to go right up here inside of the regular body. Then down inside of the script, I'm going to have to create some functions that are going to allow me to dig through this information. One of them is going to be called editText, and what it's going to be passed is a regular expression that we're going to use to verify information in these different fields. And I'm sorry, but I can't go through regular expressions in this tutorial. It's just too much. I've already covered regular expressions already, and there's a regular expression tutorial on my YouTube channel, a couple of them actually, and there we go. So what the edit text is going to get passed is a regular expression to check to verify that the information is valid. So is it a valid email address? Is it a valid telephone number? Whatever. It's also going to be passed whatever they typed into or didn't type into this input box up here. It's going to be passed the ID for this little helper span here, which is where we're going to put an error message if we need to. And it's also going to be passed a message that we would put inside of here. Okay, so those are the four things this function is going to be passed. Now to check to see if the regular expression is good or not, we're just going to go regex and test like that, and then pass in the input. You're going to see here in a second what this all looks like finished. Now in this situation, we need to come in here and actually add a warning because the regular expression did not match what we expect to be in the input box. So then what we want to do is we need to clear out the help ID if there's already an error message inside of it, and then add in a new one. So we're going to say help ID, and we're going to check if it's equal to null. Now what we're going to do is cycle through the help ID and the child nodes inside of it and delete every single child node that's already inside of there. So we're going to go help ID and remove, this is another way to remove a child, remove child, help ID, and we'll say child nodes. Alright, so we're going to cycle through all the possible child nodes that are already in the span called help ID and delete them. And then after we have possibly deleted every single one of those, we then want to also go in here and call help ID and append a new child message. And we're going to go document, create a new node, create text node, and pass in whatever the message is that they wanted us to display on the screen. And close that off with a semicolon. Else, if the regular expression did check out, we're going to do the same thing. We want to go for the help ID again, not equal to null, and we want to cycle through and remove all those different children elements. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get a while loop here and paste that while loop inside of there. It's going to delete all of them, except this time it's not going to append or add a new message that shows an error. Now what we need to do is create this new method called isTheFieldEmpty, or create this new function, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to pass all that information inside of it. So just go function isTheFieldEmpty, and we already know that it's going to be passed the input field that we're going to be checking with, as well as the ID for the helper span that's going to show an error message or not. And then we need to return or call the edit node text, pass in a regular expression, so return edit to node text. There's a regular expression we would use to verify that the name is correct or not. We're also going to pass in the input field value, which is going to be checked against the regular expression, as I showed before. We're going to pass in the help ID so that it'll be able to go in there and actually, well, let's change this to ID with a, well, let's change this to lowercase. There that is, there that is. And then finally, we need to pass in a message that's going to display if they entered the wrong information. So enter a valid name like that. And if we reload this, you'll see enter your name. And let's say I leave nothing inside of there, and on blur, I leave there. Whoop, got a little bit of an error. I have to change the name of this. Edit node text. Reload. Whoop, got another little error here. Help ID is not defined. What it's saying right here is this needs to be changed to a lowercase d. Let's see if I have help ID anywhere like that again. Nope, everything else is perfect. Change that. Let's reload it. See if I got it right this time. In here, and I left, and you can see that the span has been given the error message right there. And I have a whole bunch of other different ways to check common forms like emails and telephone numbers and all that in the link inside of the description. So feel free to take a look at that. Now to finish everything up, I'm going to stop and take a look at exception handling. Now through exception handling, we're going to be able to catch and manage errors rather than crashing our whole entire program. And we're going to be able to do this by surrounding potential errors or code that could cause an error with a try block. So let's go and create an array here first, and let's just throw a whole bunch of fake people inside of here. Now what I want to do here is verify or make sure that they don't try to call for somebody outside of the array, call for an index that doesn't exist. One way I could do that is variable get customer equal to function, and then they're going to pass in the index that they want to search for, they want to get information for. I can then go if index is greater than the customer array length. Well, in that situation, I want to throw an error. So throw a new range error, for example, and then pass in a message that I want displayed be greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to. And then just to make this work for a whole bunch of different things, we can go plus customer array length, and that's going to be an error that's going to be thrown whenever they try to access an index that doesn't exist. Else, in a situation in which they try to access something that does exist, I'm going to just say return customer array and the index. Now what I can do is jump down here and create the try block that I told you about a second ago. We're going to say try, and we'll say document write, and then we'll say customer, and then just to keep it simple, we'll go get customer and 5 like that. And then to catch the error, if it should be triggered, we're going to go catch EX for our exception, and we'll say if the exception is an instance of range error, then we want to perform certain calculations. Otherwise, we can perform other calculations. If we want to print out the error message that was triggered with it, we just go EX message plus, and if we reload it, you're going to see index must be greater than or equal to 0 or less than or equal to 4 pops up on the screen. So there you go, guys. That is an insane amount of information about JavaScript. Please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.